I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We are still in the book of Acts. The church has been scattered because of persecutions, the head prosecutor being, or the head persecutor being Saul of Tarsus. We read some of Philip's adventures with Simon the sorcerer and the Ethiopian eunuch. Lastly, we read about Saul on the road to Damascus and his vision of Christ, his later healing and baptism by Ananias, and then he was sent into Tarsus because the Jews sought to kill him. We also read a few miracles done by Peter, which is where we left it. And now we pick it up in Acts chapter 10. And once again, there are no Joseph Smith translations for this chapter. So Acts chapter 10. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a devout man and one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always. He saw in a vision, evidently, about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming into him, and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid, and said, What is it, Lord? And when he looked on him, he was afraid, and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thy alms are come up for a memorial before God. And now send men to Joppa, and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. He lodgeth with one Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. He shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do. And when the angel which spake unto Cornelius was departed, he called 2 of his household servants, and a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them to Joppa. I like Cornelius. Cornelius is a Gentile. He's a Roman. You don't get to be a centurion in the Roman army without being a Roman. Now, a centurion is actually a fairly high office in the Roman military. He's not some lowly, like a sergeant in the modern. He'd be more like a lieutenant or a captain in modern armies. So he's not a low man on the totem. He's not a low officer. He's a guy of great authority. The Italian band would be his cohort. That's the military unit that he is in command of. Now, he is a one centurion. Centurion standard would be over 100 soldiers. You know, century, that's what it is. Century means 100. Centurion means commander of 100. I believe at the time of Christ, that had been reduced so that a centurion was only a commander of 80. But a cohort, I believe is the right term, the cohort would be that 80 men. And then you'd have a group of 7 centurions that would make up a larger unit. And the seniority of the centurions would be, if you were over the first cohort, you were the top centurion over the other 6. And the centurion over the second cohort would be second in command to the first one, and so on down the line. And that was the order of authority in the military. I think the term is cohort. I don't know. I might try and get a supplement out talking about the Roman military structure. But it says here that he is a devout man who feared God with all his household. These were all Gentiles. He may have had, he likely had some Jewish servants and stuff, but most of his household would have been Gentiles. And now he prays constantly. He's always praying, and he has a vision of an angel, and the angel tells him to send for Peter. Anyways, I've rambled enough. Let us continue. Verse 9. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry, and would have eaten. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance, and saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet, knit at the 4 corners, and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again the 2nd time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. So this is Peter's great vision, and he's doubtful about the meaning. He's like, I understand this is from God, but what is God trying to teach me here? Peter didn't know what the vision was about. This was just a sheet. It says knit together in the four corners, so it's folded up like a knapsack and being lowered down out of heaven like it's on a rope. And inside is all those animals that would be considered unclean according to the law of Moses. And that is why Peter says, no, this is, I've never eaten any of these things before. And I love that. What God hath cleansed, call thou not common. And we'll see what he means by this in what we read next. But I like Peter's reaction here. Peter, he's hungry, but he says, no, I can wait for dinner. I don't need to eat this stuff. And after it happens 3 times, he gets God is trying to tell him something. But it's not quite clicking in his mind what God is trying to tell him. And he's not really supposed to get it yet. This was the primer. God was getting him ready to understand that it was time to go to the Gentiles. This was just to prime the pump. Let us continue to verse 19. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise therefore, and get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am he whom ye seek. What is the cause wherefore ye are come? And they said, Cornelius the Centurion, a just man, and one that feareth God, and of good report among all the nations of the Jews, was warned from God by an holy angel to send for thee into his house, and to hear words of thee. Then called he them in, and lodged them. And on the morrow Peter went away with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. And the morrow after they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius waited for them, and had called together his kinsmen and near friends. And as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him, and fell down at his feet, and worshipped him. But Peter took him up, saying, Stand up, I myself also am a man. And as he talked with him, he went in, and found many that were come together. And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company, or come unto one of another nation. But God hath shewed me, that I should not call any man common or unclean. Therefore came I unto you without gainsaying, as soon as I was sent for. I ask therefore, for what intent ye have sent for me? And Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting until this hour, and at the 9th hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing, and said, Cornelius, thy prayer is heard, and thine alms are had in remembrance in the sight of God. Send therefore to Joppa, and call hither Simon, whose surname is Peter. He is lodged in the house of one Simon, a tanner, by the seaside, who, when he cometh, shall speak unto thee. Immediately therefore I sent to thee, and thou hast well done that thou art come. Now therefore are we all here present before God, to hear all things that are commanded thee of God. Joppa's on the coast, a little bit south of Jerusalem, I think. If you go just west of Jerusalem to the Mediterranean, and then go down south a little bit, you'll see Joppa. Caesarea is also on the coast, but much farther north. It's more directly west of Galilee. So he has this. Cornelius is visited by the angel in the 9th hour, which would be 9 hours after dawn, which would be approximately 6. So we're talking about 3 in the afternoon is when the angel first appears to Cornelius. And he sends his 2 servants out. Peter is praying on the rooftop the 6th hour, or about noon, the next day. And it is immediately after the vision that these servants of Cornelius arrive, which means it took them almost a full day to get there. They left at a little after 3 and arrive a little after noon. So we're talking about a 21-hour journey. They lodge with Peter that night and then head back the next day. And most likely, because of the time that it takes, it says they get there the 9th hour of the next day. So they get there at 3 in the afternoon on the following. So they travel all that day, probably lodge somewhere in the night, and then continue their journey and get to Cornelius about 3 in the afternoon the next day. Cornelius says 4 days ago. That is counting the day, the current day that they're on. Because vision was on one day. They got to Peter the next day and lodged with him. They traveled for that day and lodged somewhere, and then got back to Cornelius the next day, 4 days. And it's again the 9th hour, it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. During those days that the servants were gone, Cornelius has been spreading the word. He's been telling his friends and family, look, an angel came to me. God is sending us a man who will teach us what we need to do. He's been a faithful, he loves God, he wants to worship God, but as a Gentile, he hasn't been permitted to. He is excited that God is sending somebody to teach him, his family, and his friends about what they need to do to truly worship God. And so during this time, he's gathered a whole pile of people together. How many it doesn't say, at least it hasn't yet, but I'm guessing at least a few dozen. I don't think this was 4 or 5 people. I think this was well over 20. But we continue, verse 34. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, Of a truth I perceive that God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. The word which God sent unto the children of Israel, preaching peace by Jesus Christ, he is Lord of all. That word I say ye know, which was published throughout all Judea, and began from Galilee, after the baptism which John preached, how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Ghost and with power, who went about doing good and healing all that were oppressed of the devil, for God was with him. And we are witnesses of all things which he did, both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. Him God raised up the 3rd day and shewed him openly, not to all the people, but unto witnesses chosen before God, even to us, who did eat and drink with him after he rose from the dead. And he commanded us to preach unto the people, and to testify that it is he which was ordained of God to be the judge of the quick and the dead. To him give all the prophets witness, that through his name whosoever believeth in him shall receive remission of sins. While Peter yet spake these words, the Holy Ghost fell on all them which heard the word. And they of the circumcision which believed were astonished, as many as came with Peter, because that on the Gentiles also was poured out the gift of the Holy Ghost. For they heard them speak with tongues and magnify God. Then answered Peter, Can any man forbid water, that these should not be baptized, which have received the Holy Ghost as well as we? And he commanded them to be baptized in the name of the Lord. Then prayed they him to tarry certain days. Peter, as soon as he got word from God that these men were sent to him, that God was sending him to teach them, and he saw that they were Gentiles, he knew what the vision meant. And he went and he taught them. And he teaches them about Christ. As you've heard the stories. And they probably had. They probably heard at least rumors of what was going on in Judea with Christ. And said, we're here to testify. But notice he said, he didn't appear to everybody. He didn't make his appearances public. He appeared to certain chosen people to be witnesses to the rest of the world. And the Holy Ghost falls on everybody who hears Peter preach. This is Cornelius, his family, his friends, all the people that he had gathered together. The Holy Ghost falls on all of them. And this is an astonishment to the Jews. This is them of the circumcision. This is the Jews. Because still, to this time, they are still thinking that God is the God of the Jews and not the God of the Gentiles. There's still that separation in their minds. And this will be a sticking point for many Jews for many years. And we see this here. They don't understand how God could give the Holy Ghost to these Gentiles. But Peter commands them to be baptized because baptism is required. And he defies the Jews. Who can deny these people baptism? You've seen that God has accepted them. Can you deny them? I'm going to leave that here. We'll pick this up in chapter 11 next, so I will see you there.